Hello and welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast. This is episode 99, The World Imagined with Gabriel Jackson. This is another Oxford series episode where you get to dig deep into the mind and the life of an Oxford composer. And this is one of my favorites. Just the style of music that makes my Spidey Sense tingle is that modern mixed with the ancient, and Gabriel Jackson's one of those composers that does that. In fact, you're going to hear him talk about how his influences, not only in the modern sense with like composers like Stravinsky, but in the ancient sense with composers like Tallis. We're also going to talk about how annoying it is that orchestral musicians always seem to be considered to be a little bit above, a notch above us choral musicians, and how it's unjust, but there might be some reasons for that. And bottom line, it's just annoying. And we're also going to talk a lot about his influences in his compositional career, what the pandemic was like for him as a composer, and much more. So stick around for this conversation. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Patreon.com/Choralosophy is a place that you can become a part of the subscriber tribe. For as little as $3 a month, you can get a private podcast feed, behind the scenes information on the show, as well as extra materials in my hidden Google Drive folder. You can also be a producer on the show, as there's all kinds of benefits on there. The producer level and above sponsors at Patreon are Brannigan Lawrence, Vasquez Academy of Music, John Warner, Ulrika Igrain, Munoz Alarcon, Angie Schilling, Chandler Smith, David Kowalczyk, James Mock, Jeff Wall, Kyle Peterson, Michael Herron, Nathan Hines, Ryan Main, and Stephen Kathy Kakachik. Thank you all so much for your support over there. You are keeping the lights on. The membership shot up at Patreon this month, and it could be because of the new coffee mugs. I think it's probably that, either that or people just really enjoy supporting the show, but it's probably the coffee mugs. So head on over there and check out the Patreon. Don't forget that mymusicfolders.com is a proud sponsor of the show and has everything you need to run your choral program, from choir robes over at mychoirrobes.com, which is their company as well, to excellent, beautiful leather-bound choral folders, a wide variety of prices, and everything there is really great, and tons of other paraphernalia that you might need for a choir program. So go there and go shopping and use that Choralosophy discount code when you check out. Okay. Everyone, I am back on the Oxford series on the Choralosophy Podcast, and this time my guest is one of my favorite composers, which I will talk to him about in a minute, Gabriel Jackson. So Gabriel, welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast.
Thank you very much. It's very nice to be here, and that was a very nice thing to say.
Well, it's true. I'm going to start out by just talking about my favorite thing of yours that I've done, which is your O antiphons. With Contra KC. They are just, our group did them, and the audience response, the singer response, it's just, in my 20 years, one of my favorite sets of music that I've done with a cappella choir. Because I was just enthralled by them. Where does an idea like that come from to create that work?
Well, originally it started out, I just wrote one as part of a composite sort of set of antiphons for Merton College, Oxford. For the chapel choir. So there were 7 of us that were, asked to each do one each. John Taverner was another, Cecilia McDowell, I think Howard Skempton, which was lovely. But I also thought, well, sort of one on its own, it would be quite nice to actually also just do the rest. And so that you've got a sort of complete sequence by me. As well. So I wrote the rest of them for my very good friends Truro Cathedral Choir, Truro down in the west, right down far in the west of England. Fantastic choir who I've worked with quite a lot previously, and so I sort of suggested that, and it was partly also to have something new for them to record when we did this together about 5 or 6 years ago. So it was quite weird, though, actually sort of going back to a sort of, what was essentially a sort of, freestanding piece and revisiting that and writing the other ones sort of around it. It was a little bit strange doing that, but I think it worked out okay.
Yeah, no, they were beautiful. So we're going to talk a little bit more about music later, but let's first let you introduce yourself to the audience, a little bit more of a backstory. So, who are you? Where do you come from? What brought you to choral music? What's your origin story?
Well, where did I come from? Well, I was born in Bermuda, but my parents are British, and we returned here when I was 3 years old. So I don't really have any memory of Bermuda particularly. But well, when I was 9 years old, I think it was, I was sort of sent. Well, I was sent. I mean, it wasn't really my choice, although I think if I really didn't want to do it, I wouldn't have had to. I was sent to Canterbury Cathedral to be a chorister. So my father, who was a Church of England clergyman, had been on some sort of retreat down in Canterbury. And one of the things I had to do, or did do, was like go to evensong every day and all that kind of stuff. And he kind of thought, well, this is nice. And, the choir was, obviously singing evensong, and he sort of saw a bit of, what they get up to outside of the cathedral, because the school in those days was right next to the cathedral, in the cathedral close. And he sort of thought, oh, this would be a good thing for me to do. So I did a voice trial, got in, got accepted, and so that was that. So, and I think so that was the beginning, really, of I think of an interest in the medium. I mean, I think formative experiences are, well, formative. So I think that early experience of singing this amazing music in an incredible building, and yeah,
Right.
that's
I'm going to go out on a limb and say you probably did not have that glorious beard at that time.
No, well, thank you. Surprisingly enough, no, I didn't. I was very mature child, but I don't think I wasn't that mature.
Right. Now, yeah. So now, was that when you say you were sent off, and it wasn't your choice? Of course, much of my audience is in the U.S., and so tell us a little bit about what that's like, because that's something that's pretty foreign to us, both literally and figuratively, of going off away to get your education, and of course singing all the time as part of that. But when you say it wasn't your choice, was this like a scary thing? Was it a ripping away from your mother kind of a thing? What was that like for you at the time?
Well, it wasn't scary. I mean, I think if as I say, if I really didn't want to do it, my parents wouldn't have forced me to.
Right.
But
Okay.
I just thought, well, okay, that's kind of sounds quite interesting. So I just got on with it, really. I mean, I suppose it is a slightly weird. It's a very traditionally English thing to do, to send your children off to boarding school. Not perhaps quite so much now as it was then, but I don't know. You just get on with it. It was quite fun. I mean, once you get used to not being at home and not having your family around you, which is kind of, I think, was quite tricky for everybody at first, then it's kind of quite fun. And it's a fantastic life, really. I mean, you're kind of doing something amazing every day, and Canterbury Cathedral is obviously a very important establishment, because it's the mother church of the Anglican communion and stuff, so there were always kind of big congregations. There were all sorts of kind of quite interesting events going on, all sorts of special services and other events. I sang at the enthronement of the Archbishop Archbishop Donald Coggan in 1974, I think it was, and that was kind of quite exciting. It was a huge thing. And in those days, it was kind of the whole service was televised, around the world, or at least in other countries which had an Anglican church. So it was exciting. It was kind of, it was fun. I mean, there were days when you just thought, oh, I really don't want to do it song today, but you just kind of, most of the time, it was fine.
Okay.
It was fun.
Yeah, that's great. And so then from that point, that early introduction to choral music and like as you said in this beautiful building, and you kind of developed a love and appreciation. Becoming a composer, then, was that something that you decided later in life? How did that specifically become like, I will write choral music for a living? Where did that come from?
Well, I mean, I did. I mean, I mean, I was. I mean, I did have composition lessons when I was quite little, and so, I was writing stuff. But actually, I wanted to be an architect.
Mm.
When I was small. I can't draw, so that was a little bit of a could have been a little bit of an issue. And I also realised that that actually you have to kind of train for years and years and years and years, and it's a lot of study and a lot of stuff. So that sort of in my teens, I sort of realised that probably wasn't a terribly good idea. And I suppose I don't know. By my mid-teens, I gradually sort of I think I decided I did want to be a composer, but I had no idea, of course, how to really go about it. I mean, again, I was also studying by then at the junior department of the Royal College of Music in London, and where I went on, as to be an undergraduate. So yeah, but at that time I wasn't really particularly interested in choral music. Actually, I was much more interested in instrumental music, and so the kind of return to kind of choral music, I think, came in my sort of early sort of mid-20s, and I think it was quite a conscious thing, because I suppose I wanted to continue to contribute to that that fantastic tradition which we have, and because I can't, I didn't have much of a voice after my voice broke, and so being a singer was not, singing was not really an option. So I thought, well, I'll just contribute to that, tradition by writing stuff.
Okay, so when you introduce yourself now to someone, and they say, "What do you do?" Do you call yourself a composer? Is that how you introduce yourself?
It depends who I'm talking to.
Okay.
I do. I mean, I would always say I'm a musician, but then of course people always say, "What do you play?"
Right.
And then I often do say I'm a composer, but then of course often people say, "Oh, what do you do? Do you write music for films, or do you do music for TV?" Because they don't really kind of conceive that people might actually write music that's not for films or not for TV or whatever. But I do call myself.
Or they might assume that you write music for orchestra or for, like you said, film score, or
They don't really think about orchestra. Well, I mean, if you're talking about like cab drivers and that kind of thing, they don't really kind of think about orchestra. It's always the first thing is always kind of TV and film.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Is it time to renew your Sight Reading Factory codes yet? Probably coming up soon. So use that Choralosophy checkout code when you do, and get one for you and all of your students. It is a non-optional tool in the choral classroom of all levels. Itty bitties all the way up to college students should be using Sight Reading Factory, in my opinion. So get started on that and use Choralosophy at checkout every time you renew for 10% off. That makes sense. And of course, if you say, and I have that same thought as a conductor and as a teacher, is if I say musician, oftentimes I do say musician, but then it always leads to the next question and the next question, which is fine. And so I appreciate your answer of it depends on who I'm talking to. If it's someone I want to talk to more, then I might give that nebulous answer. But I always find it interesting, because I think that when I meet the average person, if I explain that I make my living primarily in choral music, that's very foreign to people. That's confusing to people, because I don't think many people picture how a living could be made doing what if they're outside of our world. That's hard for them to picture.
I think, and if they think about choirs at all, they associate it with church, I think, or at least in this country they do. So yeah, but I'll tell you something that really annoys me a lot is when I or anybody else like me when you get described as a choral composer, as if that's sort of something slightly different from being kind of a real composer, and I think, you know what I mean? I mean, nobody says, nobody says that Beethoven was an orchestral composer or a chamber music composer. Nobody says, nobody says, well, I suppose perhaps people do say Wagner was an opera composer, but you know what I mean? It's this phrase choral. I mean, I don't know if you get it. This idea that choral conductor is somehow something different from being a real conductor, and I think it's all bound up with the fact that people don't take choral music as seriously or regard it, I think, as important as orchestral music or whatever. I mean, why the fantastic people in the choral music sphere, conductors, other artists, why are they not as famous? Why are they not as kind of worshipped as people who, as conductors of symphony orchestras, or because they're not. But actually, and I think that's because it's not proper music. I think, but at some level, that's what people think.
Do you have theories? Do you have theories about how we got there? Like, so what are when you try to answer that question to yourself of why does that happen?
I don't know what happens. I mean, I wonder if it's because the majority of choirs are amateur.
Yeah.
I mean, that may be a reason for it. I don't know, but I mean, it's this. I mean, I've talked to all sorts of people about. I've talked to Peter Phillips, of the Taylor Scholars, where exactly the same thing. He has this, same thing. That it's not regarded as important, I think, by an awful lot of people.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I think really. I don't really understand why, but I find it quite annoying.
No, it's definitely annoying. I think there are some economic factors that underlie it, partly, and that is that, of course, with instrumentalists, there is a certain investment in equipment, and that they have to put in that makes it easier for people who are paying the bills to see why it costs that money. And then for singers, it's harder for people to see that because, again, I'm thinking about this from the perspective of people who are outside of our world, right? They don't understand. They see a singer or a choral conductor as you just walk in and do it. In which case, anyone can walk in and do it, and I could get somebody to do it for free. And I think
I suppose that's the point, isn't it? Actually, I mean, because everybody can sing, however badly, whereas
exactly.
whereas not everybody can play the piano or the violin. That's true, actually. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
It drives the whole cost of everything down.
Yeah.
In fact,
but it's very annoying. It's very annoying.
Oh, agreed. Agreed. And I could even go a step further to where it's easier. I would say it's probably also easier to find a really good, like a very good, passable amateur singer who would sing for free than it would be to find a very good, passable violinist who can step in and play something like.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's the irony of all that, isn't it? Is that actually, amateur singers are far more able and far more accomplished actually than your average amateur string player or whatever. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, because it's a strange paradox. I mean, amateur orchestras and stuff, exist and they give concerts, but I don't think that the standard is probably not as high as it is, from certainly the top amateur, well, most amateur choirs actually. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah. It's not a satisfying answer, but I feel like it's just good old fashioned supply and demand.
yeah. But I mean, I remember a composer colleague, sort of when he thought he was teasing me, some years ago. So I was saying, oh, you write all this choral music, and I said, yeah, when I get loads and loads of performances around the world, do you? It's actually, because that's another thing that I always say to actually, young composers, in workshops and that kind of thing, is actually, if you can get it right in terms of writing music that people want to sing and people want to listen to, you will get loads and loads of performances.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there are more choirs in the world, I think, probably than any other kind of ensemble, actually.
Right.
And so it's a huge opportunity. The choral world is actually a huge opportunity for composers, I think, if they want to be performed.
Yeah. Now that's something, that side of the industry I definitely am not familiar with. And it's one of the reasons I do this Oxford series. I get to talk to a bunch of composers. Would you, in your opinion, do you think it's easier to make a living as a choral composer than an orchestral composer?
I don't know. I mean, all I know is that, and I don't know why this is either, that, choral commissions seem to be paid, or you can be paid at a higher rate than for other forces. And I don't know why that. Again, I don't know why that is. And maybe that's unique to this country. Maybe that's not the case elsewhere in the world, but certainly in this country, I can charge more than I could for, and I earn more money from composing than a lot of my colleagues do, who mainly write instrumental music.
Interesting. There's got to be some supply and demand issues there too. Now, I'm curious, do you consider yourself exclusively choral as a composer now, or mostly choral? How would you describe what your workload?
Well, I mean, it is mostly choral, and has been for some years. But I certainly see myself as a composer who writes a lot of music for voices, not a choral composer, because that's not. But yeah, I mean, I'm more interested these days in doing stuff which involves instruments, rather than kind of having written a lot of a cappella music over the years. I'm not really interested in, unless there's a particular angle or particular reason. I'm not so interested in that. I'm interested in voices and instruments nowadays. That's the kind of direction that I'm moving in, or have moved in, or trying to move into.
Yeah. Now, do you think that's just because it's almost as if you're moving into a new phase of your career? You've been there, done that with the a cappella stuff, and now you just want to expand what you're doing. Where does that idea come from, do you think?
I think it is just that. Yeah. I mean, because I've written an awful lot of unaccompanied music over the years, and I just, it's more interesting to me to explore other ways of writing for voices, I suppose, in combination with instruments.
Yeah, absolutely. So how would you describe your musical style when you're writing, when someone performs? If someone's never heard your music before and you had to verbally describe it, how would you say that Gabriel Jackson's music sounds?
Well, again, I suppose it depends who I was talking to. If I was talking to somebody who knew something about music.
Yes, a choir nerd is asking this question.
Oh, okay. Well, I did a pre-concert. I was doing a pre-concert talk a few years ago with a few other composers, and one of the things we were kind of asked to finish things up, well, what were our favorite composers? And the others all kind of said, like, sort of Beethoven, Schubert, Mozart, Bach, whatever. And I said Tallis and Stravinsky, and the audience all laughed. And I said, what's funny about that? But actually, I suppose if, to be really pat, I would say, and it's not really a very good description, it's not a particularly accurate description, really, but it has something of the truth in it. I would say Tallis meets Stravinsky.
Now, can you go a little bit deeper with those two composers in that? What aspects of Tallis? I mean, I feel I've done enough of your music to kind of very much understand that reference. But and then what parts of your music are Stravinsky? So what are those influences in particular that you pull into your style?
I think, as far as Tallis is concerned, I think Tallis is the great exemplar for me of, the great Tudor composer. There's huge stylistic variety. If you think about it, you've got the little simple English anthems like, If You Love Me, which I think is, one of the most perfect pieces ever written. You've got those early sort of rather post-Eton choir, but very florid, ornate, big votive anthems like Gaude Gloriosa. You've got a spectacular thing like Speminalium, the 40-part piece, and everything else. So, and I think part of what I'm have been tried to do, or been interested in trying to do over the years, has been to reimagine somehow Tudor music, the sound world of Tudor music, the aesthetic of Tudor music, to sort of reimagine that, or recreate somehow the effect that it has on me. I think that's been kind of quite a big part of what I've been always been interested in doing. As far as Stravinsky goes, I mean, the block structures, the fact that I don't, my pieces are made up of blocks of material which are juxtaposed. There isn't really any development in the traditional sense. There were rather abrupt transitions. So, and I think that kind of other gestural aspects probably come from Stravinsky. But I think the Stravinsky is that way of constructing music, and that it's that it's in one sense, however animated it is, it's essentially static, and that what dynamism or whatever there may be is done through putting. Because I see writing music as putting musical objects next to each other.
Yeah.
Rather than some sort of evolutionary process. And that I think totally comes from Stravinsky.
That's awesome. That's very cool, and I can hear that now. I just like I said, I probably would have guessed Tallis. I would not have guessed Stravinsky, but that makes sense to hear that in your explanations. That's very cool. I love that insight. This question, I think, this next one is kind of has an intent to pull us towards some of your future endeavors. But before we do that, the pandemic for the last 2 years, how has that affected your job and your work life? For some composers I've talked to, they said it was heaven. 2 years to be by myself and just write a bunch of music. And then for some, it's been, oh my goodness, it was awful. No performances, no, so I think it kind of depends on the mindset. What was that like for you?
I would say it was fairly awful, although I think it was not as awful for any composer actually as it was for performing musicians, because one doesn't necessarily, certainly in my case, work didn't like dry up overnight like it did for all performers, because I still had stuff that I was contracted to do and needed to be done. Okay, the deadline was a bit notional for those things, obviously, because nobody knew what was really happening. But I had stuff to do. So I think it was not, and I think it was not as bad for any composer as it was for performing musicians. But actually, on a sort of more personal level, I mean, I found it actually initially. I found it, 2 years ago, when we all kind of shut down and were basically all locked up at home and stuff. Although my day-to-day life is not, I mean, there were normally, if I'm particularly, I'm very busy, there are kind of, a whole week goes by where I don't really do anything except maybe go as far as the corner shop, So being at home on my own working and not going out is not an abnormal state of affairs.
Right.
But somehow, despite that, somehow initially the fact that we had no choice but to live like that, I found that really, really difficult to actually work. And I mean, I spent weeks and weeks just kind of, initially like, March 2020 or whatever, just kind of just watching stuff on Netflix and just, and I found it very difficult actually to get anything done, as I say, which was a bit weird given that, as I say, life is often involves not going out and just sitting at home working. But I kind of got after a while, I kind of got the hang of lockdown, I suppose.
Right.
And so it was kind of fine. Really.
It's almost like if you're going to be a hermit by your own choice, that's one thing. But if you
well, exactly. I think that's the thing. It's somehow, I mean, it's a bit like, I'm one of those people that, actually I quite like wearing a suit and stuff, but actually somebody says you've got to, I think I don't want to now. It's like kind of somehow, so being a hermit, if I choose to be, is fine. But actually, as soon as you're forced to be, I say, I don't want to do this.
Right.
I want to go out and party and whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty common human reaction. We are at our core, we are not we're not caged animals. We don't like to we don't like that state of affairs very much, do we?
Yeah, but I mean, I think what I have found, and I'm sure this is true for a lot of composers, is actually that there wasn't really a problem initially, because I had work and people had work, but actually it's the problem is manifesting itself now, or has manifested itself over the last kind of 6 months to a year, is that things which would have been projects which we were talking about, and which would have been firmed up and contracted and worked on, weren't, because nobody knew what they were doing. So I think there's a sort of and also of course all performers, because of have also got like a backlog of stuff which they weren't able to do over the last 2 years, whether it's new pieces, or whether it's kind of standard stuff they have programmed. So there is a sort of there's an ongoing effect, isn't there?
Yeah.
There, I mean, a piece that I wrote that should have been premiered, quite a big piece for the bicentennial of St James King Street in Sydney. It's kind of 40-minute mass setting for small choir and small orchestra, and of course that was supposed to have been premiered in July 2020. Obviously it wasn't, and then they hoped that they might be able to do it the following January, which of course is Australian summer, but the rules which would have had to have been relaxed in order for them to do that were not relaxed as they thought they were going to be, so that didn't happen. And because of the situation, the ongoing sort of situation in Australia with COVID, it still hasn't been done, and there isn't. I'm not quite sure when it will be. Partly because of that kind of backing up of things that but all these things, as I say, that all these things that people wanted to do that they can't, or they couldn't. So
yeah, almost like
I think lots of people have had that experience.
Yeah, it's like a line got backed up, and the composer has to go back around to the back of the line because the performers and the organizations have to move on to the other things that they would have been doing, and it's tricky because it's not it's almost like you just took two slices out of the pie for the last 2 years, and those pieces aren't coming back.
Yeah.
That's tricky. But the good news is you've got some stuff coming up, some premieres, some exciting performances. Hopefully, then the signal is that we would be able to start picking up some of those commissions and all those types of things going forward. So that's exciting. So tell us what you're excited about right now.
Well, what I'm most excited about is the next month on May the 15th, the Elgin Master Choral are doing the US premiere of a big piece that I wrote, which was which was commissioned by the Three Class Festival along with the Elgin Master Choral here, the Three Class Festival here. That was again going to have been premiered, of course, in July 2020. It did happen last summer, in the UK, in Worcester Cathedral. They were kind of quite brave, actually, the Three Guys, really, because it was very touch and go whether they were going to be able to actually do the festival as planned, because of changing rules about what you could and couldn't do, and the fact that here it was thought that actually people would be allowed to do certain things in terms of numbers of people mixing and all that kind of thing, and then that was put back a bit to when that was possible. So it was all kind of a bit of a knife edge, but actually they rather heroically actually succeeded in putting a full festival on with no social distancing of the audience and no social distancing of performers and stuff, which was really quite an early, we're talking about, late July last year, which is quite early. And again, the US premiere was to originally be in November last year, but I'm very excited that it's happening on May the 15th in Elgin, Illinois. So I'm very excited about that.
That's wonderful. Will you get to come?
Yes. I mean, well, unless I have a negative COVID test,
right,
or something the day before I fly. But yes, absolutely. Which is
that's great,
exciting, really exciting.
That's wonderful. Can you tell us about about the work, a little bit about what went. Describe the work. What was the inspiration? What is the text like?
Well, it's a big it's the biggest thing I've done in terms of combine the combination of duration and and forces. So it's a symphonic chorus, quite large symphony orchestra, tenor soloist, about 45 minutes. It's called The World Imagined, which comes from a Wallace Stevens poem, which is the last movement. So there are five sort of movements. It's continuous, but there are five movements. It's about what's it about? It's about ecstatic contemplation, I suppose, of existence, of the cosmos. This all sounds terribly grand, doesn't it? And it's about, I think it's about the smallness of us, and the hugeness of existence, and it's got we've got some fantastic texts, including as I say, this beautiful Wallace Stevens poem, which closes, which is the kind of last movement of the piece, which begins to light that poem that begins to light the first light of evening, and it ends with two lines which actually in the light of COVID and everything are really kind of remarkable. We make a dwelling in the we make a dwelling in the evening air in which being here together is enough. Which obviously takes on sort of additional resonances now, and we've got there's a fantastic the third movement is a fantastic sort of rather metaphysical poem about time and death, and also light, by Doris Kareva, an Estonian poet who I've set quite a few times. Fantastic poet. We've got some Walt Whitman. In the fourth movement, we've got a wonderful poem which I set as a tenor solo, by the Scottish poet who has lived in France for many years, Kenneth White, which is very much about, and it's the heart of it really, is about contemplation. This is a summit of contemplation, and no art can touch it, and it's which is a fantastic text. So there's some wonderful text in it.
It sounds like it.
Hopefully lots of colour and stuff, and effects of light and all this kind of thing, because I like trying to make effects of light, whether it's blazing, sort of dazzling light, or whether it's little subdued glow, or whether it's
That's awesome.
Trying to make light.
That's awesome. Now, as far as pen to paper for a work like that, was most of that done before the pandemic? Was any of it done during? You said that it was kind of got pushed back, but when was it actually written down?
It was finished. It was finished before the pandemic. I mean, but before the pandemic, not that long before. But yeah, it was. Yes.
Well, the reason I ask is because it's interesting to me over the last couple of years how, as you said a minute ago, describing it, that now certain things have more resonance, might just because of the collective experience we've all had in the last 2 years, and I found that to be true with several pieces of music that I've looked at or sung or done with choirs in the last few months, where I feel like this now takes on new meaning. Or maybe it's that I'm more receptive to the meaning. I can't really tell. So it sounds like there are some moments in this piece that you feel might fit that description as well.
Oh, definitely. But I think, I mean, I think it is. Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? How one does look at things, often see things differently, or see things in pieces which. Well, it's not that they weren't there before. It's just that we live in different times, don't we? And our experience has been so different over the last 2 years. But I think, I mean, I haven't done anything. I haven't really written anything about the pandemic as lots of people have. I mean, I sort of did. I mean, I did a little piece for the Bach Choir, which is a big symphonic chorus based in London, actually, it was originally a piece for them to actually do basically at home on Zoom. It's only a short piece. For them to, then put it all together, and as so many people did, and that kind of is about that kind of is about the pandemic. At least it's about emerging from darkness, emerging back into light. Mm-hmm. That was the only sort of thing that I've done that's had any definite relationship to what we've been through. I mean, I have to say I'm not really terribly interested in writing sort of music about how awful it was, because actually, I don't know that we need music to tell us that, really, because we know that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of weird ambulance chasing, I think, to be sort of, I don't know, writing stuff about how awful that experience was, because actually, as I say, everybody knows it was awful because everybody had the same experience. Right. So I'm not quite sure there's much merit in there, but there you go.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's I understand that impulse for sure. That's interesting. Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. And plus, it's not only that we don't need to write a story about that which we all experienced recently, but it's kind of like I said, we don't need it anyway, because there's so much music and poetry that was written centuries ago, or 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, that tells that story.
Well, that's true. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah.
Separation, loss, death. All of the things that we experienced. Yeah. We experienced it in grand scale, but they're not new human experiences by and large.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to have us kind of wrap up with a little bit of a lighthearted view of your music, if you're willing to play the game. And here's the question I like to ask composers. Are there any pieces in your catalog, and it doesn't matter if it's Oxford or another publisher or anything like that, but are there any pieces in your catalog that you're kind of surprised have done so well? In other words, you didn't really think they were that great, and then all of a sudden audiences or choirs love them?
I'm not sure about pieces that I didn't think they were that great that get done a lot. I mean, there are pieces that I don't think are that great, but they tend. A piece that I didn't want to do is probably my most performed piece. So a long time ago now, Choral Cathedral again actually asked me to write just some evening canticles, and they wanted a cappella. And they wanted forward, and I didn't really want to do that, because I'm not that interested in plain chant, and I'm certainly not interested in simply harmonizing plain chant. So I thought, well, I'll do I'll write my own monodic material and alternate these monodies with chordal stuff. I mean, I really didn't want to do it, and it gets done all the time.
And what's that called?
It's Magnificat and Domitis Choral Service, and I mean it gets performed loads more than anything else I've ever written. So some things that you don't want to do sometimes turn out to be kind of quite successful, I think I've found.
Right.
Is there anything that I think is really awful that gets done quite a lot? No, I think generally the pieces that I don't think are terribly good
don't do well. Well, that's good.
But the other thing that actually surprised me is when I did when I did a 40-part piece to kind of as a kind of as other people have done, of course, as a kind of companion piece to Speminalium. I mean, it gets done an awful lot for considering what it is, and I never expected that to happen at all. I thought it'll be like a one-off, and and nobody will ever do it again. And
right.
Given that assembling the forces to do any 40-part piece is a bit of a taradiddle, I'm being really agreeably surprised by how frequently that gets done.
Mm-hmm.
And also a piece that I did for choir and electric guitar, which again, I just thought nobody's ever going to do this again. It all surprises me that he gets done reasonably often.
Interesting. Now, okay, so I'm going to flip that question now on its head. Are there any pieces in your catalog that mean a lot to you and that you think are really quite lovely and wonderful, but people don't seem to pick them up and run with them?
Well, there are a few pieces that I'm quite pleased with that don't really get done very often, and so it would be nice if that might change. I mean, one of them is actually a mass setting also that I did for Truro Cathedral. I mean, people might be put off because of the title, because they don't know how to pronounce the title, which is Missa Trevariensis, which was the Roman, that Trevarian was the Roman name for Truro. And I don't know if it's because people are scared of it because they don't know how they think they don't know how to pronounce it, or maybe other people don't share my own enthusiasm for this particular piece. But what else? I don't know. I mean, of course, the kind of the super difficult pieces that I've written, particularly when I was associate composer to the BBC Singers, and also actually, some of the things that I've written for Donald Nally's group, The Crossing, which are designed to be kind of super difficult and to kind of show off. Inevitably, they don't get done very often because there aren't that many choirs that are up to it.
Yeah, right. That's great.
But if you're going to, and that's something which I think people sometimes don't kind of quite get. I think a lot of composers, I think it's fine to write really difficult stuff, but you have to accept that there aren't many people who are capable of then doing these pieces, and therefore they're not going to get done very often. So, you can't write something that's really, really difficult and then complain that nobody does it. That's you know what I mean. That's just rather unrealistic.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fair. Well, Gabriel, let's go ahead and wrap this up by just allowing you the last word of anything that you want to let us know about, or just anything that you wanted to say that I didn't let you say.
Well, I don't think there's anything I wanted to say that you didn't let me say. And my last word. Well, actually, anybody who's within any distance, do come to Elgin, Illinois, on the 15th of May to hear the US premiere of The World Imagine, and also anybody who's in or around Philadelphia, come to hear fantastic group Variant 6, very good friends, launching their first CD, which has 2 pieces by me on it, and all sorts of other interesting things in Philadelphia on 21st of May, or in New York on the 20th. And I don't know, what else do I want to say? Just perform my music and commission me, and we'll
agreed. Audience, this, if you don't know Gabriel's music, you've got to find out. You've got to go do some. It's just stunning. The entire catalog is wonderful. And Gabriel, this was a great conversation, and I appreciate you spending some time with me in your wee hours of your morning there.
It's now 2:15, but that's quite early for me.
Oh, wow.
I'm a night owl, so it's fine.
Okay.
But it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, thank you so much.
And well, hopefully we might meet in person.
Oh, yes, I hope so. Well, thanks, Gabriel.
Thanks very much for this. It's been fun.
Good. Thank you all for listening to that episode. I hope you really enjoyed getting to know Gabriel Jackson. I know I have just been a fan for years, and to get to have this conversation was nerd heaven, and I appreciate you tuning in and listening all the way through to the end. So, of course, if you're still here, that means you are one of the VIPs. So go ahead and share, distribute the episode, find something about Gabriel's music that you love, and then share it in that context, getting the conversation going about this music and about this wonderful art form that we support and we love is huge. So comment, share, subscribe on podcast players, subscribe on YouTube, whatever it is that you're able to do. And of course, hit up sightreadingfactory.com, mymusicfolders.com, ryanmain.com, graphitepublishing.com, all those websites. You can use Choralosophy at checkout. Get a discount that helps you and your program and helps the show. And of course, you can leave a rating on your Apple Podcast app or any other app that lets you leave a rating, including Facebook. All those things help. So we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening.